what do I possibly say to begin something like this? That was insane. Like this just this doesn't happen. The Champions League finals don't tend to be like this. If anything, they tend to be fairly cagey games. It's been a very long time since a performance like this has come around in a game of this magnitude. And the commentators made reference to the 2011 final and said this was probably the most dominant final since then. And even in that game, Barcelona won 3-1. That is nowhere near this. This was crazy. I I don't know where to begin with not just a win, not even a dominating win, but annihilation by PSG of Inter Milan. And I guess I'll start by saying congratulations to PSG. You've joined Arsenal as European champions, and I will take every chance to bring up that Arsenal won the UWCL, and Luis Enrique, surely amongst the elites now, will unfortunately still not be as good as Rene Schlegers, only because she is the greatest manager in the history of football. Anyways, back to the men's game. I had expected PSG to win mainly because of the semifinals, because I had actually been backing Inter for quite a while. Like from the very beginning, I was telling people Inter have a pretty good shot at winning this. And I genuinely did believe that, mainly because of their defensive capabilities. I mean, in the league stage, they managed to concede one goal, I'm pretty sure, in 8 games. Like, the defensive strength was on show for everyone to see. And so that only strengthened my belief that Inter legitimately could be a champion. And then the Barcelona game happened. The Bayern game a bit too, but really it was the Barcelona game that made me think maybe it's not going to be Inter's year after all. Because I thought for a lot of that game that Inter was actually quite poor, especially the second half at the San Siro when they were up 2-0 and gave it up, where I thought Barcelona just blew them away almost. And Inter did manage to get a goal at the end, and it's maybe harsh to say a team that scored 7 goals over 2 legs was poor, and there wasn't, not the entire game was poor, but enough of it was that I kind of started to doubt that first thought that Inter could do this. And, yeah, I wasn't so sure. And the team that was built on a solid defense, a very strong defense, had also conceded 6 goals over 2 legs. So I wasn't as convinced by the defense, but I wasn't as convinced by Inter anymore. Again, because of that second half where Barcelona were just far and away the better team. Meanwhile, PSG were a very good team against Arsenal. And in the semis, again, it kind of convinced me PSG was going to win the final. And just that skill to kind of have the ball, pass it around the back a bit maybe, and then within a few moments you've created this defense splitting pass. You've gotten the ball halfway to the box and created a really strong scoring opportunity. You often score that's not a skill that very few teams possess. That speed in the counterattack, almost no one has the ability to do it like that, but it wasn't just that PSG was fast. They were really good at passing too, and that means that they could create chances from almost nothing. So that kind of explosive possibility just made me think that PSG was going to win this game, but still I didn't see 5-0 coming. That's insane. Again, it just doesn't happen. I'm so stunned by this, and the Inter players probably are too. I imagine most people are. This is crazy. So they came into the game and immediately they were the better side. And I mean, DeMarco was at fault for some of it, but I think Inter's defense in general was quite poor. They had players lagging back and playing PSG guys on side when they probably shouldn't have. And this so-called defensive solidity just evaporated. It was nothing. And DeMarco was the one who faced a lot of the scrutiny, especially in the first half. I actually thought that his decision to go and try and block a potential thought wasn't necessarily a bad one, and if the shot had come instead of a pass, that maybe he would have even been lauded for that. Uh, Obviously, it didn't turn out that way. And I mean, when I saw that PSG goal, the first thought I had was like, that was far too easy, especially for a Champions League final. It was weird seeing Inter play in yellow, anyways, and that in terms of the kid, it didn't feel like this was Inter Milan, and in terms of the performance, it didn't feel like it was Inter Milan. PSG had it in far too easy first goal, and then that second goal is where that skill I talked about, where they can create something out of just about nothing, really showed itself. Where you have this run from Doué that starts in his own box and goes all the way to the other side of the field for a goal. Insanity. This team is crazy. So 2-0 at halftime, Inter Milan probably knew better than anyone that two-goal leads aren't safe because they had blown two-goal leads in both the first and second legs against Barcelona, even though they still did win. So maybe, when you're losing 2-0 at halftime, it's not insurmountable. It's not like you can't score 2 goals in 45 minutes. In fact, that's not even a particularly difficult thing to do. It's just the way that PSG had dominated that first half. And to their credit, Inter Milan did at least start the second half better. And there were maybe 10 minutes, maybe even 15 if I'm being generous, where Inter Milan at least had more of the ball, had more chances, even if they weren't particularly great chances. Like, that was better than what they were doing in the first half. But then, as soon as PSG got back on that, speedy counterattack kind of opportunity, a great little back heel flick from Dembele, and maybe that was the Kvaratskhelia goal. There were so many goals from PSG that I'm kind of mixing them up in my head. So 5-0. There's a lot of things I can talk about. I feel like there isn't too much more I can say about the game. I could go a bit more into how the next three goals were scored, but I feel like that would almost be redundant just because of the performance from PSG. So there's some talk about this maybe being the last kind of outing for a lot of Inter players. It is quite an old team. And if that is to be the case, I feel quite bad for him. And I do feel bad for him in general, just because of how dominant it was, but especially if this is going to be the last game for a lot of the players, because that means that these, glittering, decorated careers would be ending in a whimper and the biggest stage possible. It kind of reminds me of the Brazil run in the 2014 World Cup, where they had that, David Luiz free kick in the quarterfinals that sent them through to the semis. But then the semifinal was so horrific, so brutal in a way that no one saw coming that a wonder if Brazilians almost wish that they hadn't won that quarterfinal just to avoid the embarrassment that was the semis. I mean, that semifinal between Inter and Barcelona has maybe now not so much ingrained itself in Champions League lore just because of how bad the final was. Like, it's not often that you get a result so humiliating that you might almost wish your team didn't win the semifinal, and I wonder if Inter fans might be in that position. Maybe they wish that that goal hadn't been scored right at the end and Barcelona just won in 3-2 the San Siro to go through, and then they would have avoided this. An unbelievably painful result for a team that has a ton of history and pedigree. I mean, this is a club that has won this competition 3 times. And this is just shameful from them and probably something that's going to haunt the club and a lot of these players for a long time. I mean, if you're the manager, how do you even, start to pick the team up after a result like this? This is the biggest game in club football, and you've put in a performance like that. It's unbelievable. Like, yeah. So, one other thing I want to pick up on quick before I end this is there was mentioned by the commentators as this being a win for football, that the stars go away and PSG finally win without the stars win. They win as a team rather than a squad of a bunch of individual players who seem to be bigger than the team. And In that sense, I kind of understand it. And it's a lot of very young players. It's quite a scary group of PSG players who can now go on to dominate for a very long time, which I'm a bit nervous about. But to call it a win for football, I kind of hesitate to do that. I have a lot of reservations about PSG, not just because they beat us in the semifinal. I mean, that probably helps. I might feel a bit salty about that. But, like, I think there's a legitimate case to be made. Like, PSG have pretty much ruined domestic French football. And it's not just that they've destroyed the competitive balance of the league where they can massively outspend every club, but they've played a pretty big part in a lot of clubs, indirectly, but still, they've played a big part in a lot of clubs, like, facing bankruptcy. Because your options are either spend well beyond your means to try and to compete with this giant, who is the only club right now that seems to be in a solid financial position in France, or face being second forever, which is just a really sad existence. And a lot of clubs spend beyond their means because of the threat that PSG poses. And the fact that they are financially secure in a league where the Media Pro deal fell out and it's just a lot of issues with French football, I struggle to call this a win for football or a win for French football. In fact, I'd even call this a loss for French football because the team that is played such a massive part in destroying the domestic league for France has won. And they're going to go on to continue dominating French football as French clubs continue to struggle and face bankruptcy. So I hesitate to call this a win for football and definitely not a win for French football. And whilst I can say that the players have earned this and I can be happy for that, I don't think that PSG finally getting their hands on a Champions League is a good thing for football. So I can't really support that sentiment. It's quite a long video now. I will sign out now. To anyone who's still watching, thanks for making it to the end. I guess congrats to PSG, but as I just stated, I don't think this is a good thing for football. Anyways, signing out. See ya.